everyone, good morning and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ciphr. It's Unlocking the CPO's Potential to Deliver Organisational Success. It's great to have you with us today. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Claire Williams, who's our Chief People and Operating Officer here at Ciphr. Hi Claire, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. So it's just Claire and me on the webinar today. It's just us two, but we've got loads of insight from Claire and a recent white paper that we put together and published. So there should be lots for you to dive into today. Speaking of which, here's a quick look at our agenda. I'll take you through a quick tour of what we do here at Ciphr, and then I'll hand over to Claire. She'll discuss the changing landscape of the HR and CPO role, how to build fruitful partnerships with senior leaders, how to grow your personal brand and hone your skill set, and answer any of your questions. So as I kind of alluded to, this webinar is based on a white paper that we published recently. I'm just going to put a little link on your screen. If you want to grab a copy of that, just hit the button on your screen now, and you can read that at some point in the future. We'd love this to be as interactive as possible, so do say hi in the chat and share your questions and thoughts for Claire. She'll be jumping in and out of that, mainly at the end, but also in the middle if we can too, to try and get you all involved. So please do share your thoughts there. And as I said, here's a quick look at what we do here at Ciphr. We offer a range of people management solutions right through every stage of the employee lifecycle, from recruitment and onboarding through to payroll, D&IB consultancy, benefits, e-learning, and of course, central HR. We won't go through any of that today. This is not a sales webinar, but we'd love to speak to you if you are interested in any of our solutions. You can visit our website, which is ciphr.com, or email us at info@ciphr.com, and we'd be happy to set up a session with one of our experts. And that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Claire now, and I'll pop back when you need me. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Catherine. So it's just me today. So normally we have a couple of people on these webinars, so there's an opportunity for me to kind of bounce off and have conversations, but I'm going to be relying on the chat today. So I'm just going to be talking at you. We've got an hour. I don't think the actual presentation side will take that long, but I'm really happy to answer questions along the way. But also in the chat, I think if we're talking about particular topics or suggestions or ways you can amplify your role or make that move into the CPO role, feel free to also put in any experiences you've had, because no doubt other people that are joining the webinar would benefit from that as well. So I will try and keep my eye on it and jump in and out as we go along, but you should be able to see the chat somewhere on your screen. I don't actually know what the view's like for you guys, I'm afraid, but we'll get into it. So the points we're going to go through today, we're going to talk a little bit about the changing landscape of HR and the CPO role. I really want to focus some time on how to build those fruitful partnerships with senior leaders. I think that's probably one of the most critical things you can be doing as part of amplifying your role and improving your visibility at a senior level, and then also how to grow your personal brand and hone those kind of important skill sets. So we've got a couple of polls along the way that I'm hoping Catherine will remind me of if I forget where they're meant to drop in. And then, as I say, we've got some time at the end for Q&A if we don't pick up anything as we go along. So I should be able to control these slides, and I can't see where I do that, Catherine, if you are still.
So there's a vertical panel which says content, and it should be under there, but I will move.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's all good. Apologies, everyone. It's like always a technical issue. Perfect. So I'm really excited to share some of the thoughts today on this topic, and I think it's so prevalent, the change of HR at the moment. And I know we still kind of hark on about COVID, and that was and still is a really impactful moment in time that has changed how we all work. But for HR, I think we all know that was quite a critical turning point and really changed the visibility that HR has within most organisations, but particularly the importance of that CPO role really emerging. And we see more and more of those now at board level, having a seat at the table, reporting into the CEO. And for me personally, it's a bit of a weird one. I've always reported into the CEO. I've always worked in the SME space, and originally was a PA moving into HR, and so that's always been the role I've reported into. But I know for a lot of teams, especially if you're in larger organisations, that's kind of the pinnacle of where you want to get to in relation to having a seat at the table, having that direct voice at board level, and having the ear of the CEO. So more and more we're seeing that. And I think what's also really interesting is how we're seeing not only more people report into the CEO, but you're really seeing them become a force to be reckoned with in relation to that duo of the CEO and the CPO. And more colleagues I speak to in the HR profession either talk about the role that they're evolving with their CEO, or if they're reporting into a CPO, really talking about how strong that relationship and how that is very much seen by the wider organisation as being the kind of partnership that is very much looked upon as being quite a trusted senior relationship. And that's also evolving in relation to the CPO's role evolving. What it was historically and always traditionally very focused on HR now is much broader in the sense that it is helping drive company performance. And a job title that I'm loving seeing come through is Chief Performance Officer, which I just think is such a great representation of actually what we're seeing the HR role evolve into, which is it's not about people, it is about driving performance and driving performance through your people, but a range of other metrics and methods that CPO role has influence over. So quite a lot to cover off as we get into it, but we'll jump in and go from there. So this slide is kind of just talking about the things that we would typically expect to see in the CPO's world in relation to the remit and the spans and controls that they have, but also in the HR space. All of those I wouldn't expect to be new to you. And dependent on if you're in a specialist role, a large or a small organisation, there will be some aspect of this that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. But what I think is always really interesting is when you factor in all the extra stuff. So this is just some of the things that I was brainstorming of what else do I either still have some form of responsibility or my team do, or that I have looked after in the past in different roles. And it goes so far beyond what we would consider to be the people function. So, things like compliance, data protection, health and safety. In my role, I'm Chief People and Operations Officer, but I'm also the Data Protection Officer, the Senior Information Risk Officer. I look after health and safety. I look after a range of other things that sit outside of what you consider to be that normal HR space. And that, myself and my Director of People always laugh about being our kind of edge of desk jobs, which are full-time jobs in themselves, but we're expected to kind of grab onto and get our heads around. But the plus side is that these extra edge of desk jobs give you a really good opportunity to expand your awareness of how the organisation works, expand your commercial awareness, give you the opportunity to stick your hand up when there are maybe strategic projects going on where you believe you can add value. And actually, there's this whole toolkit of experience you've got that sits outside of creating policies and procedures related to the latest legislation that you're able to pull on and say, hey, actually, yeah, I can absolutely get involved in that strategic project. I did that whole piece the other, last year we moved the office. That was one thing that we'll add to the list is office management and moving the office. So I think it's about remembering and somehow documenting all those extra jobs you do, and then recognizing that each of those will give you some sort of unique experience and skill set. So grab onto them. Don't try and push them away as you might do in a previous life, and kind of use them to your advantage. So this was just to kind of give a real quick snapshot of what we know and love about HR, but actually the realities of what HR is and what that remit looks like. But what we did want to jump into was starting to debunk some of the myths that people have about HR. And I think Catherine is going to get a poll on the go now, so we can just ask you about which myths you guys have experienced or had impacted the most in your career to date.
Exactly, yeah. So which of these myths, and no, these are just 4, there are plenty of other myths about HR, has caused the most difficulties for you so far? The options on your screen there are that HR knows nothing about the commercial realities of the business, that CPO is the last rung on the HR career ladder, that HR professionals aren't comfortable with data, and that it's the CEO and the CFO that sit at the top of the organisation, the implication being that the CPO doesn't have a role there. Have you, Claire, I mean, we'll get into all of these in more detail, but are any of these feel really familiar and you're having flashbacks to probably more junior roles?
Yeah, I think all of them probably still apply now, to be fair, in one way or another, depending on the audience you're dealing with. Yeah, I still think that they continue. I think it will take a really long time for people to have a shift in their view. And some of them, in the nicest possible way, some of them are true to an extent. So it's more about how you move past having that brand of not knowing the numbers or not being commercially aware. So there's still definitely very much live myths that you tackle on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and that branding point is really pertinent. We're going to be looking at personal brand later on, and these are things you can start to address for your own personal brand if you're finding them to be a persistent challenge. So that poll has ended. I'll show you the results. So 50% of people who voted said they've been affected by the myth that HR knows nothing about the commercial realities of the business. 33% said that the CFO and CFO sitting at the top of the organisation has been an issue, and 17% of you said that a lack of comfort with data has caused an issue. And nobody checked that the myth that CPO is the last rung on the career ladder. So I guess those are some good news for us.
Yeah, that is good news for us. Yeah, perfect. We're still going to debunk that one, but yeah, it is good news that people aren't feeling that way. So super. Okay, right. In that case, let's jump into the first myth then. So the myth that HR isn't commercial, I think it's really important to clarify what we mean by commercial. I think people automatically think commercial is sales, and it's absolutely not. It is a range of fundamentally understanding how business works, how your business works, how that work moves through the business. And I think a lot of what I'd recommend you're doing if you want to either actually become more commercially aware or demonstrate to the business that you're more commercially aware is going to be about raising your profile within the organization and within a range of different areas of your business. So being really curious, I think one of the best things you can be is curious and be really open about not understanding different areas of the organization. So I would really, really recommend inserting yourself into the organization from start to finish. If you need to, physically map out how the work moves through your organization. So how are leads being generated right at the outset? What's your proposition out in the market? Do you understand your competitors and your position within that competitive landscape? What makes your unique selling point? What are the things that your sales guys and girls are saying to prospects when they're meeting them? Have you shadowed a sales call? If not, absolutely do, and just follow a new sale through the whole organization. It will be a great insight into understanding how that work moves through the business. And what that will also give you is a huge insight into understanding what your people are dealing with. So one of the things that's going to always be incredibly credible is being able to always maintain that you are the voice of the people. And you'll only be able to maintain that if you are spending time with people outside of your team and your hierarchy. So whether you're doing that on a regular basis and you somehow schedule regular time to spend with different areas of the organization, but even just doing a one-off exercise where you're going out to follow the work through the business, understanding those team strategies and really shifting, I think making that shift to being a CPO and becoming a business executive is being absolutely crystal clear on what the organizational goals are, how the different departmental strategies are delivering against those organizational goals, but more importantly, how does the people strategy deliver and support those individual departmental strategies? So you might well be creating an HR strategy that looks great on paper and delivers loads of value to the organization, but if those strategies don't actually support what your sales director needs to deliver, in making sure that we are upskilling a really fantastic sales team that is high performing, that knows the market. If you're not underpinning that with an L&D strategy that is actually delivering those outcomes, that sales director is probably not going to hit their numbers. And if you're not hitting the numbers, you're not going to be hitting the organizational goals. So working to understand, how the business works, what are therefore the strategies that are delivering against those organizational goals, and looking at your people strategy and understanding, if you were to go and look at every different area of the organization, does your people strategy in some way contribute to moving that team closer to that goal, or are you removing barriers through other methods? So really, really understanding the organization, how that work moves through, really starting to just act as a senior, a kind of sounding board for those business leaders. And that takes time. I think one of the things that I really recommend is, if you're not, make sure you're having regular one-to-ones with different business leaders around the organisation. You know, I will meet every 2 weeks with each member of our executive leadership team, and we'll both just come with a list of things that need to be discussed. But a lot of the time it is just a sounding board. What's going on in your area of the organisation? Where are you seeing problems? And that's not where are you seeing problems with your people, that's where are you just seeing problems? What's going wrong? What's going well? What's happening next month? What do we need to be focusing on in the second half of this year? But just starting to be that sounding board that becomes a really trusted partnership. So they know that they can just come and talk to you about issues or problems without you being there to judge or question or challenge them. You can just be the sounding board that you need to be. I mentioned already about understanding the market and the competitors. It is really important if you want to be sat on a board and you want to be an executive leader. You have to know that business. You have to be able to essentially sell that business, particularly if you're in an organisation that has some form of investment backing, you know, private equity or you know, venture capitalists. You literally do need to be the person that can sell that business. So you have to understand where you sit in the market, what makes you unique, what's going on with competitors. Get Google alerts set up. Set up Google alerts that are for your business and any of your key competitors, so you get notified when there's things going on in that space. It's a really great way just to keep abreast of what's going on. It's also great if you're the person that's notifying the wider leadership team, hey, did you see our competitor acquired another organisation? It shows that you are making that effort to be commercially aware. If you can, and I'd recommend this at any level, stick your hand up to get involved in strategic projects that are nothing to do with the people space. I mean, I say that, we all know that any initiative is going to have a people lens, and so you can absolutely be adding your expertise in that space. But just more broadly, what else is going on? Can you be saying to your CEO or other executive leaders, hey, I see there's that project kicking off, I'd love to get involved. It's definitely what I have done throughout my career, is always having a load of extra edge of desk jobs that are nothing to do with HR. So that's a really great way, again, just to embed yourself into the wider organisation and just be, you know, back to that point, be curious and challenge. You know, you have to challenge other areas of the organisation. You know, I know that when I speak to HR professionals, they are such bright individuals that can see where there are problems in the organisation and can nearly always present an idea about how something could be done differently. Don't be afraid to take that and challenge. It might be you need help developing how to go about challenging, but absolutely do make a point of bringing that to the surface and raising, hey, can I just question why we do it that way? And have we thought about that? And, you know, let's maybe just explore if there's some options we could try that might move that thing forward. So I think there's some really key things that you can take away in relation to how you can aim to become more commercial and focus on shifting your mindset from being an HR leader to a business leader. You know, don't refer to your team in the, you know, constantly as being the you know, this is what the people team have done. It's more, this is what we've achieved in relation to moving our people agenda forward. So changing your mindset slightly and really putting that lens on that broader commercial kind of outlook. The next one was that CPOs, the top rung on the ladder. Now, clearly, this wasn't actually a problem for any of you, which is fantastic. And as we all know, there are more and more people that are in CPO roles that are moving into bigger roles, broader roles. You know, I'm a great example of moving from CPO to COO last year, but we're seeing it more and more. We're seeing evolutions of the job title to be more representative of what CPOs actually do. So that Chief Performance Officer role that I mentioned earlier. But you can also just be thinking, you know, whether it is actually moving up or just becoming a board member or a company director, that's a great forward move. Can you be taking on more responsibilities across the organisation? I mentioned earlier about my role being Senior Information Risk Officer. Are there other more formal aspects of how your organisation work where you can be taking on responsibility? Clearly, the natural step is to become COO. That is naturally going to be the next rung on the ladder. But there are other things you can be doing. So can you be doing stuff outside of work, which is around, or inside work, around mentoring and coaching? They're really great ways to just elevate your profile, to continue to develop yourself as much as other individuals, but contribute back to the profession is always a great thing you can be doing. Can you be looking at how you could get more exposure and give, again, more back to the industry, or just be giving more back full stop through doing media, PR, get yourself set up for some of the PR links, so news articles that are reaching out for comments. X is actually a really good platform where lots of media outlets will promote when they're looking for comments, but also charity work. So a really great way to get experience is to become a trustee of a charity. It will give you board level experience if you haven't already had that, but it's just a really great thing to be able to put on your CV, as well as actually getting the experience that goes alongside that. So then we've got myths that HR doesn't do numbers. I actually think this is quite a true myth, that it's not a natural tool in our toolbox. I hate numbers, and I have worked really hard, and I did accountancy at A level, so that's with someone that actually does kind of know the numbers, but it's just I don't think our natural language in lots of instances. If you love numbers and it comes naturally to you, you are probably steps ahead of lots of other HR professionals. And I say that not just on my experience, but most people I mentor or speak to in the HR space, I know it is an uphill battle for them. So it's not our strength. It is something we really need to actively work on. And I think in general, we are becoming much more comfortable, and we're having to become much more comfortable in our ability to collect, find, interrogate, analyze data, full stops. But I think when I think HR doesn't do numbers, I go to finance, as in my brain goes to, we don't know the financial numbers of the organisation. And that is certainly, again, when we're talking about board level representation and your role in a CPO role in particular, you really do need to get under the skin of understanding the finances of the organisation, not only in relation to your own budget, how you understand, you can work with, you can manage that budget successfully, but you actually do need to be able to pick up a board pack and read a P&L and understand what's going on with cash, and understand where we are tracking against budget, against a number of different metrics. So my advice is make the CFO your best friend, or someone in the finance space, or someone outside of your company that is willing to just give you the time to go through it, probably over and over and over again. And I think unless they're saying they're not prepared to spend the time with you, just keep going back to make sure that your understanding is correct. There are loads of courses out there that you can do, which is finance for non-finance managers, things like that are actually quite handy. But just really leverage the relationships you've got. There's a wealth of information out there. So I've put kind of learn the basics. There is so much you can do. Even if you just scroll kind of through social media, there is so much bite-sized information, so much free resource where you can go and learn the basics. But also understand, when we talked about a moment ago, understanding how the work moves through the organisation. Try and take some time, again, with your CFO if they're happy to spend the time with you, to also understand how your company finances work. So how does the money flow through the organisation? How is your business financed? What does debt mean? How does cash flow work? What's happening with your banking? What are your banking arrangements, banking covenants? Whatever it might be. If you're in board meetings or in any senior leadership meetings, you'll learn to understand the language that's being used quite commonly. What are the key financial metrics that are really important to your organisation? But just go and study them, basically. Make sure you understand and that you are spending time with people that are willing to spend time with you to get to grips with that. Again, if you're in the private equity space, if you're whatever your financial setup is of the organisation, spend time to understand what that means, understand it end to end, and encourage your CFO. If you feel that there's a wider piece of education needed around the organisation, can your CFO or a member of the finance team, or even your CEO, do a monthly update to the senior team that aren't in the boardroom, that don't receive the board pack, to just let's do a monthly update on what's going on with the numbers, and use that also as a setting to educate that wider senior management team. You won't be the only person in a senior role that is wanting to hone and expand this skill set. So can you be the person that's opening the door for other people to be learning with you as part of that journey? Succession planning, some of those people that you're working alongside, if not yourself already, will probably be board members at some point, potentially in the company you're in. You need to be playing the role as the HR lead to make sure that, even purely from a succession planning perspective, those people are ready to take that step when it arrives. And then finally, the CEO and the CFO run the show. I think this has historically always been the case. More and more, we're seeing it's not the case. And actually, the CEO-CPO relationship, as we did this white paper on, is so critical now in organisations. You know, myself and Sean, our CEO, are so in lockstep. You know, we are constantly in dialogue, we are constantly messaging, meeting regularly, talking about things that are nothing to do with people, just what's going on around the organisation, both being the eyes and ears of what's going on, sharing, feeding back that information, acting as a you know, a really trusted confidant to that individual. So yeah, really, it really is now becoming that CPO-CEO partnership, or, you know, that magic triangle of the three. So the CEO with the CPO and the CFO, that's very much, you know, what I experience here at Ciphr. You know, myself and the CFO working incredibly tightly alongside the CEO to work together to run the organisation. So it does vary, but I think that break from CEO, CFO being the duo is really starting to come through. And that is just in recognition of, you know, ultimately the organisation is not going to perform if your people aren't performing. And where is that senior representation to make sure that everything you're doing in relation to your business strategy and where you're focused on has that lens on the people as much as it does on actually the financial side of the organisation. So they were our big myths. I'm just going to dip in and see if we had any comments. Who do I report in? So I report into the CEO, and I have done for the last, well, my whole career actually, in every role, but certainly the whole time I've been at CEO. I know that some people report into CFOs, which I always find a bit of an odd one. Just like we don't understand numbers, they wouldn't necessarily know how to build a performance management framework. So it is a bit chalk and cheese. But yeah, so that's where I report. Someone else said that they run a finance fund on finance managers internally as part of leadership development. That is a great idea. We're currently launching our new Managers Catalyst program, and part of that is all about financial education. So if you have got a hand in the L&D side of the organisation, definitely incorporate that in. And a couple of other people just saying that. So yeah, that's good to see. So really just summarising some of the stuff we've just talked about. So HR leaders then and now, you know, in the past, very reactive. I remember when I first started, it was, you know, personnel, tea and tears. That has really moved from personnel to HR. And I think HR is now very much more people and culture. But whatever language you use, I think the shift from it being very operational and tactical, very reactive, you know, quite black and white. You know, the policy is the policy. That's how we do things. And yeah, really viewed as a cost center versus a cost enabler or a value driver, and excluded from those C-suite decisions. I think a lot of that we know is not the shape of HR anymore. And what we can see on the right-hand side is much more, you know, reflective of what we see. So very much crucial part of the C-suite and partners to the CEO. Really acting as a business leader. And I mentioned it before, I will mention it again. As you reach that business executive level, changing your mindset from being a functional leader to being a business leader is quite a hard mental shift to change. Your default is always to think about, okay, what's happened with my team? What's my team doing? I don't know, for example, I'll be speaking to my people team and they'll be very focused on the challenges they're facing in recruitment. We're struggling to hire, or this is the problem we're facing. Whereas the way I will present that to the organisation is recruitment is a real challenge at the moment. This is what we're seeing in the market. This is what we're experiencing internally. And at no point will I actually talk about my people team and what my people team will be experiencing. It's what's the business challenge? What are we doing as an organisation to move that forward? And what have we achieved since we last spoke to you at the board? So changing your language, changing the way you present data to being problem and solution focused versus team focused, but starting to make that shift so that you can speak in a board setting as a business leader that is just looking at the problems the room's facing and figuring out how to tackle those, versus being a functional leader. Always horizon scanning, you know, being much more proactive. You know, my mind, I've got the mother of all to-do list that has lots of different sections, and about a month ago I added my 2026 section. So what are the things that I need to be thinking about when I get to planning 2026, but it's already on my radar? A lot of my language right now is talking to the business and the teams about, okay, well, you know, H2 is kind of locked in, what are we looking at 2026? And it is amazing how that shift of mentality goes out, you know, to not just a month ahead, but 6 months ahead or a couple of years ahead. You know, I've talked about expanding, continuing to look at bigger roles. Where can you get involved in strategic initiatives, and always looking at how you can add value to the business and drive performance. So a great way to think about this is, I talk a lot about is, when I'm speaking with the teams and challenging any of the teams, is what we're doing, is that initiative or those 20 initiatives, whatever it might be, adding value to the business? And they know that what I mean by value is it making it more profitable? Is it literally generating more revenue, reducing costs, increasing efficiency, doing something to make the business more value? Or is it making more profitable? Or is it making the business more beautiful? So is it doing something that is also inadvertently going to add value because it means we've got an extra badge, it means we've got really great diversity, it means we've got something that is a really positive story to tell the market, whether that be our candidate market, our prospective market from a sales perspective. But thinking about what value means to your organization and making sure that everything you are doing and your colleagues are doing are contributing to that value. So it might be different if you're in charitable sector, profitability may not be the right lens, but figuring out what value means to you, and ours is kind of profitability and beauty, for example. Okay, moving on. So how to build fruitful partnerships, mouthful, with senior leaders. I think this is probably one of the areas that I would always recommend people spend the most of their time. Having not only a fruitful relationship with your CEO, but those wider members are critical and are really, really, for me anyway, always very, very trust-based. So, when we had our new, when we had our CEO join, he had a period where he was building relationships, but that number one conversation from myself was, I know you've got to form these relationships, but I'm telling you up front that you have my undivided trust, and this is a two-way thing. So while you're finding your feet, I can be that trusted person, and that's just built over the years. So really making sure that there's a few key things that I think sit within those relationships. And we talk here about CEO, CPO, but this really does apply to any of those relationships you're having at a senior level. So mutual accountability. I think your ability to make sure that you are holding each other accountable. I'm the voice of reality when we know that people can have weird and wonderful ideas and go off in tangents, and kind of bringing it back down to earth and thinking, okay, well, here's the people impact, here's the organizational impact, but also just sense checking, even to that next piece, bringing that people-centric culture to life. You have to be that conscience that is checking people in relation to decisions that are being made, a bit of a moral compass, and just making sure that everyone knows there's a safe space for them to soundboard, like we said before, and build that trust. So real mutual accountability, being able to challenge, bringing that people-centric culture to life is such a critical part. If you're in that CPO role, that has to be your number one focus. Are you maintaining a connection to reality over what your people are experiencing? So I mentioned before, being the eyes and ears of the organization. Are you actually spending time with the organization outside of your hierarchy? We hear a lot about things around the gap between executives, typically in much larger organizations, but that absolute break from reality where they're incredibly high earning versus people that are maybe not earning huge amounts, have a very different grasp on reality around things like cost of living, the challenges they're facing, the compromises they're having to make to be able to work. And sometimes that just gets lost at executive level. So you being that voice that is still bringing people back to what your people are experiencing day to day is critical, and try not to become one of those executives that becomes a little bit removed from reality. So maintaining that and bringing that people-centric culture to life in all of your interactions with those senior leaders, but particularly the CEO. I think really, data has to be part of your day-to-day toolkit. The CEO is going to always want data. They are always going to want data-driven decisions. And we know in the people space that data-driven decisions are great. They can also be sometimes quite tricky to produce. So if you're just talking about how people are feeling in the organization, make sure you've got 10 examples of 10 different people you've spoken to outside of your hierarchy that are supporting the information you're sharing. But really using data to inform and transform that employee experience, using data to do workforce analytics that marry up data that sits outside of the people space with your people data to make really informed views of what could be contributing to problems or what could unlock potential moving forward, but having data at the heart of the conversations you're having. So, for example, I know everyone always loves examples. So the cadence of how I work with the CEO, we have at least one weekly one-to-one, which is about an hour. We'll be in constant dialogue anyway via Teams, and we'll obviously pick up the phone when needed. But we will also then have at least once a month where I will produce a detailed MI pack that's to do with our people. I say my wonderful team will produce that pack, and we'll sit and go through that. We'll normally also have our people director in the room to talk about what's really going on. And that's in addition to end of week reports, the board reports. So there's a lot of data that myself and the CEO are always getting exposed to, but just figuring out what's those useful data points for you and leveraging those. And then working with them to meet the goal, meet the goals of the business. And again, this goes beyond the CEO. This goes back to that point that I was saying about really challenging and getting under the skin of those different areas of the organisation to understand what are the goals they need to achieve and how can you help them get there. So that is the kind of the headlines on the things to craft. Outside of the CEO, I think there's some very specific relationships that are worth you investing in. You'll have a different makeup of what your senior team looks like and what your C-suite might look like. But kind of some of the ones that I will work quite closely with, although I am also CEO, so we'll come on to how that works. But Chief Financial Officer, I have talked about that magic triangle. Really try and build that relationship with the CEO, CFO. I know that sometimes HR and finance can naturally clash because of those different languages that we inherently speak, but becoming best friends with the CFO is going to pay dividends in the long term. And actually, now I look at that my relationship with my CFO, which was probably very one-sided initially of me needing a lot from him, but now it is far more balanced in how much he will come to me for advice around people and ops, and it really balances. So building up and having that is a critical one. Chief Marketing Officer, this is such a great. We've done so much work over the last couple of years of building our EVP and really making sure that our employer brand speaks to our external brand, but is very unique to our people. So having the Chief Marketing Officer on side to help you craft that story and make sure that everything sings the vision and the purpose and the story you wanted to sing we found has gone a long way, but is one that I would really recommend you build on. And likewise with the CTO. So, we are in a digital first era, and that is only going to go in one direction. I think if you're not naturally tech savvy, I would really encourage you to dedicate some time every day or every week to learning more about tech. I really encourage that you do 30 minutes on AI. It's an area that I'm really investing in. I think any business leader really needs to understand what AI is bringing to the table and how that's going to impact organizations and fundamentally your people. It's just another iteration of technology and change. So really just learning what's the technology that enables your business and drives your business, what are the external technologies that you need to be familiar with, and investing the time. But your CTO is going to be a fountain of knowledge to either be able to point you in the direction of what you need to be looking at, what you need to be considering, but also understanding the technology strategy in relation to not only what are the people enablers that need to sit alongside that, but you are HR practitioners. What do you need from a technology perspective that they can help you with to leverage and accelerate your function? And then the Chief Operating Officer. So it's a bit of an odd one. I'm obviously wearing both hats, but have previously worked alongside Chief Operating Officers. I always have found that COO and CPO relationships are typically very naturally tight. There's a huge overlap in relation to the work that those different roles are doing. But more naturally, HR roles are expanding out into operations for all the reasons we've talked about. As you start to understand how the work moves through an organization and how a business operates, that's where you'll kind of naturally just see more and more operational overlap. But they're great to make sure that you understand the ways of working and what needs to be moved in the right direction to enable acceleration across your ops and your operating mechanics. Okay, where the next poll's not for a couple of slides, is it, Catherine? Just checking I'm on track. Okay, how to actually build those relationships. So I'm conscious of time, so I will rattle through a little bit. Be in regular contact. I mentioned before, if you're not already, make sure you're having regular one-to-ones with those key stakeholders. You have a shared OneNote where you're both dropping ideas through the week that you're then going to talk about when you come together, so things don't get forgotten. But just using the time, even if you get to that meeting and it's half an hour in the diary and you haven't got anything on your agenda and they don't, and they may be angling for a cancellation, try and still just have that time to chew the fat about what's going on. Those conversations are always the ones that will really help build that trust. So get the regular time in where you can. Be data-led. And again, we've talked about data a lot, but this is more about when you are sat in a boardroom and you have a number of people metrics that you are asked to deliver. I always do find it interesting to remind the other people around the table that they aren't my number, they are our number. I can't control the number of one-to-ones that are taking place in the sales team, and I can't control the employee sentiment in the finance team. They are a number that we are collectively responsible for. My role as the CPO is to make sure that they have the tools, the framework, the data to be able to do that well. So when you're going into those conversations with those senior stakeholders, have the data that relates to their area, be ready to talk about what their metrics are saying, and being ready to tackle how you can problem solve with them to look at ways to improve those metrics moving forward. Be a help, be a partner. Don't just be there to say, hey, you've missed your numbers, what's going on? Be there to kind of say, let's really understand why they're going wrong. What can I do to help? So that you can build on that. Be in tune with their team. That point about spending time outside of your hierarchy. Try and have 10 to 20% of your time blocked out in your diary just to spend with the business. So if you're not in a physical office where you can do that, what I tend to do is just literally run off a list of employee names and just randomly select names and pick up the phone or drop a Teams note to say, hey, you're free for a chat. Just jump on a 10-minute chat. It's rarely actually it rarely starts off about work. It will just be, how are you, how's the family, what's going on in your life, and then naturally move into, and what's going on with work, what are you finding is working well right now, what's not working well, talk to me about your relationship with your manager, things like that. But you will have first-hand information to be able to talk to that executive about what's going on in their space, and are they aware that actually these things are happening, or this is the mood music, this is the feedback we've been getting from that area. But really helps with your integrity if you're able to speak to that firsthand. Be curious. I've said it already, so I won't go into that, but get out in the organization, learn. It will really pay dividends. And I've put be collaborative, and I think be collaborative is twofold. It's be collaborative, but also be consultative. So one of the tricks that I find quite helpful is, a lot of the time we are asked as people, professionals, or any professional, to present to a senior leadership team on an initiative or to feedback data, and you're normally presenting to a cold room. They don't know what you're necessarily presenting, or certainly the detail behind it. There might be decisions that need to be made off the back of that presentation. I find it really helpful to try and pick them off. So work your way round those people that are going to be in those group settings, to go through those initiatives in advance so that they feel informed, they feel comfortable, they've got the chance in private to voice concerns. It'll make you far more informed. It'll mean that the presentations you're making are far better rounded, because you've already had the opportunity and the insights to understand where you might get resistance, and you can factor that in, name check them in those meetings. I've already had a chat with John about this. He thinks this is a great idea, but had some concerns about that, so I've already factored it into the presentation. So being collaborative, I think, doesn't have to just be you helping them with that problem we mentioned on being data-led. The metrics aren't stacking up, what can I do to help? That's great, and that's collaborative, but ask them for help. Be consultative about things you're going to be bringing to the table and to the business, because if it's a people item, it's going to affect all their people, and there is instantly going to be interest and probably quite strong opinions on what it is you're presenting. So use that as a way to share ideas and influence and gain buy-in. It is a very helpful way, I found in the past, to get a better outcome. And be transparent. So I think I think authenticity in general comes through being transparent. I think being your authentic self, being really transparent about what's going on within your space. You're not just looking for information from them, you're opening up to them about what's going on, in your world, whether it be with your team or the progress with initiatives, what's working well, what's not working well. Again, that collaboration piece, asking for feedback. But they're just some of the tips that I would suggest if you're wanting to build those relationships around how you can go about doing that. Okay. And then I think we wanted to ask a poll here, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm just going to let you rest your voice for
Thanks.
half a minute, because Claire's shouldering all this herself. So yeah, we're going to look at honing your skill set. And before Claire goes into some of those skills and how to refine them and also grow your personal brand. We want to get your temperature check really on which of these skills that you struggle with most. There's probably other skills that you might struggle with, so pop those in the chat if there are some other ones that you'd like us to discuss. Having a commercial mindset, adaptability, data literacy, leadership, tech savviness, tenacity, and confidence are the options there. And viewing this as a non-HR person, I'd say those are a lot of struggles that people generally have with work, whether you're in a different department or not. Maybe you're in your early careers. I know in our internal women's network, Ciphrs, these are the kind of things that come up time and time again, especially around confidence and feeling like you have a voice. And I think some of those struggles cross over into the HR profession because it is such a female-led profession. And I say female-led rather than female-dominated because it is led by women, although there are some good men out there too in the HR space. So I'll just let that poll run for another couple of seconds. Claire, are there any of these that you feel like you still struggle with now, even though you've reached CPO-CEO level, that you're still combating?
Yeah, probably still data intelligence. I think that's kind of a bit of an ever-changing one, because there's just always the next ask of what do I need to be looking at now, and trying to preempt. It's always really hard trying to preempt also what the board are going to want. They're normally a very experienced group of people that have worked with multiple organisations that are going to ask for something you've never considered. So I think just really being open in those scenarios of I have no idea, but let me go away and figure it out, and then just going and learning, getting into that kind of constant learning mindset is always super helpful. And then I think the business leader one is, again, it's a bit of an ever changing space. So I think my shift to board, and therefore being able to personally, the challenge or the bridge for me was being able to stand in a boardroom of what was all men at the time and be able to hold my own as a business leader. Now it's kind of, how do I be able to step into a space of investors or CEOs or a different space and hold my own? And I will just kind of figure out what are the elements of my own confidence or knowledge that I don't have that I need to go and learn so that I can then take that next step and feel confident. So yeah, I think the business leadership thing is always quite a tricky one.
And I think we could even add like an extra one to this list where we've got tech savviness. I think AI savviness is the next thing that people are going to struggle to understand.
Yes.
Like it feels that conversation has accelerated, I'm going to say in the past 8 weeks to where we are, which is the midpoint of 2025. I know it's certainly something that we're thinking about and talking a lot about, not only in our products, but how do we map out AI governance and usage internally across all of our teams? So that's something that everyone is trying to get to grips with and figure out. We can talk more about that later, but I'll show you the results. I won't keep you in suspense any longer. So confidence was cited by 36% of people, followed by having a commercial mindset, which was a quarter, and also some decent proportions of people picking out leadership and tech savviness on those results. Super.
So I can't see the poll for some reason, but I have got some bits and bobs on each of these. So Catherine, or in the chat, just shout out if you want me to talk more on those. I think we've talked about the commercially astute one, so I won't recap on that. Business leadership in general, we have talked about a little bit, but I really honestly do believe the more you can improve your commercial awareness, the more you will naturally find it easier to be a business leader, not a functional leader. There is a lot you can be doing just to make sure you're aware of what's going on in the big wide world. I hate reading the news. I hate spending time poring over what's going on in current affairs. So I will just find quick and easy ways to do it. I ask Alexa when I'm doing my hair in the morning, can you give me a 5-minute rundown of what's going on in the news? I use Blinkist so that I can get a 15-minute rundown of what the content of a new book on leadership tells you and what those key takeaways are. And then if I'm interested, I can go and dive into it in more detail. There's a lot of things out there you can do that are, I'm a mum, I'm traveling, I'm busy, I'm doing a lot in lots of different spaces. And I'm sure that is the same for lots of you. So just figure out ways that you can fit it into your life to try and build up some of that just broader awareness of business leadership as a whole, or what's going on in the AI space. So yeah, try and figure out those quick nuggets, but just get exposure. Figure out in your network who you can spend more time with that's willing to give you their thoughts on how to tackle certain problems or what business leadership means to them. They're always really insightful. I think adaptability is critical. I think if you're in a space where you are just rinsing and repeating things that have worked previously for you, you're not curious to explore new ways of working or to not say no. I think one of the things that HR has always been brandished with is computer says no, and it's something that I speak a lot to my junior people, the members of my people team that are a bit more junior, is actually businesses can do whatever they want. You want to fire someone tomorrow that's been with you 20 years without any reason, you can do whatever you want. The risk to the business is it's going to be an incredibly costly exercise. So getting into the mindset, I'd say from a business leader perspective, sorry, just flipping back to that slightly, is one of the biggest changes I've made is I look at everything from a risk lens. So actually, what are the risks to the business in doing something or not doing something, and being able to present something back to the business that comes at it from a risk perspective. But yeah, that kind of adaptability does also mean making some decisions that are a balance of risk. There might be some cost to the business in doing that. And I'm not talking about people things right now. I'm talking about just as an organization, you have to be adaptable, especially in this market. So just understanding what other organizations are doing, what are people in your competitive space doing? Are you networking with other CPOs and other HR practitioners or just other business leaders to understand how they're dealing with those sorts of scenarios? But yeah, adaptability would really, really encourage you to just break out of your comfort zone. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. I love that phrase. So I think just get uncomfortable and learn to be adaptable as much as you can. Data intelligence, it is a tricky one. It is unfortunately one of those kind of keep practicing. But a couple of people have obviously popped in about AI. I probably use AI 20 times a day. I use AI all the time, and I'm doing a talk later actually at LinkedIn on AI specifically. So if you can join that, we're basically spending an hour talking about what we're doing on AI. But having the permissible use policy internally, so that you know what you can and can't do. But we use Copilot, we have it locked down so we know we can put confidential information in there. It is great for data. So I will just put a load of raw data in there, analyze, tell me what the trends are, help yourself. There are ways to do it that are a little bit smarter, a little bit savvier. But unfortunately, it is just a lot of practice makes perfect on data intelligence, getting yourself into the mindset of coming to every conversation with at least a data point. What is the data that's backing up the point you're making? What is the data in relation to what's the return on investment in relation to introducing something new? But yeah, that kind of risk lens again really comes back into those proposals. Are you solving a problem, or are you just wanting to introduce something that's nice and fluffy that adds no real value or doesn't de-risk the business? Value-led leadership is so critical just in today as from a leadership perspective. I was about to swear, I'm not going to. The dinosaurs, there's the kind of dinosaurs and something phrase, which is, just really stale, old school styles of leadership. But, people today, you are all people, I'm sure you're wanting the same thing. I want value-led leadership. I want people that I can actually relate to, that are human, that are curious, that are humble, that are empathetic, that are really understanding of my personal situation and the wider workforce situation. And you are in a critical position, especially if you want to be developing, to make sure you're really leading by example. You are beyond reproach, even if you're in a very junior role, making sure that you are maintaining your integrity, you're understanding the values that are important to you or your organization, and you are absolutely exerting them in every interaction you're having with the business. So value-led leadership, I would really strongly suggest you, if you're not clear on what that means to you, do the work to figure it out and figure out what those behaviors are that exhibit what values are important to you and your organization. Digitally fluent. So again, AI, I know that's like a big topic. There is so much out there on AI. I have got somewhere like a 30-day plan on which I can share, which is a podcast you can listen to that just start to give you more information on AI as a whole. This is not a tech thing. This is a people thing. This is a change thing. This is a business-wide thing. And I think as any business leader, and definitely when you're sat on boards, you need to understand the impact that's going to have on your organization. And if you don't yet know that, then take the opportunity to be the person that's going to champion AI in your organization. What's the culture you want to be creating around AI within your business? What does that look like? What does it feel like? Who owns it? What's the permissible use? But get familiar with it. There is such a wealth of information. Just start using it instead of Google. That's what I do. I have every single question I would normally put into Google now, I'll put into AI. Every time I'm writing something, I'll scan it through AI to see if it's got improvements. Every meeting I'm prepping for, I need a summary for a meeting. The board pack's going in and it's giving me a 2-page spit out version. So yeah, AI is a great way for you to just be more efficient, but is a great opportunity for you to take a strategic initiative that you can be using to leverage your visibility within the organization. Very conscious of time, so I've talked about curiosity, and I'm just going to touch on confidence. I absolutely hear you. Confidence, I don't think that goes away. I think imposter syndrome is something that if you suffer with it, you're probably always going to suffer it to one degree or another. I love the flip of talking about fantasized talent. So if I'm feeling like I've got a bit of imposter syndrome, I'll flip to the absolute extreme of, it's fine, absolutely going to nail it. I know everything there is to know about that topic. Whereas deep down, I'm going, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I think find your people when it comes to confidence. Get a mentor, get a coach, get a network that you can really link in with, where people are probably sharing your experiences and your doubts, but that are also able to help you have a reality check and navigate you back to a place where you can realize the confidence you should have in a topic. We are awful for self-doubting ourselves, but there is a lot out there that you can do. And for me, it's certainly been a massive journey. It's still a journey I'm on when it comes to confidence. And every new space you step into, a minute ago I was talking about stepping into a board space, and now stepping into a investor space or a CEO space or whatever that might look like, that just comes with a massive doubt. And so the more you can be doing to learn and educate and expose yourself to people that are going to help you along that journey as well, I would really, really, really recommend it. So yeah, that's my top tips on where you can go in relation to some of those skills that you might want to develop and hone over the years, or as your career progresses. There was a final slide. Okay, sorry, I've got 3 minutes. I didn't realize there was a final slide. That's awful on me. Okay, showcase your experience. Big fan of using reports, end of week reports, summarize up what are the challenges, what are the successes, what do you want to showcase to your senior leadership team or just your CEO. Get a roll up from your team, what's been working for them, what hasn't been working for them. Just a very, very quick and easy way for you to showcase what's going well, what's not going well, and to showcase actually all the great stuff you're doing on a day-to-day business basis that they might not see. Broaden your experience. We did talk about that. One of the tips I'd have on broadening your experiences, those key stakeholders you meet when you're onboarding into an organization, they don't just have to happen at day one. If you've been with the company 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever it might be, and you're wanting to reestablish those relationships, just book the time in. I'd really like to learn more about your business, or I'm doing a project on this and I'd like to get to know more, have more information. Just reintroduce yourself and just be transparent about what you're trying to achieve. And I guarantee people will be really receptive to it. So broaden that experience. Be visible, get your name into the internal comms, get your name into external comms, be posting on social media, be posting out into whatever your internal comms channels are. But look, no one else is going to do it for you. So back yourself, promote yourself, make yourself visible. Your name will then be the name that rings in people's heads when they're talking about, I don't know, who's going to make our next senior leadership team, who's the real up and comers in our business. If you're not seen, you're not seen. So get out there. Lead by example. We did talk about a little bit on the value led. Leading by example, I think also be really self-aware. Ask for feedback. Actually, don't ask for feedback, ask for advice. So one of the things I find much more useful is, instead of saying I'd love to get some feedback, which will always be retrospective and a bit of a, oh, well, yeah, I could have done that differently in that moment. Ask for advice as well. What would you advise I do moving forward? Or what would you advise if I want to be looking to achieve this in the next couple of years? So get some advice, or get some advice if you've got a presentation coming up. What could I do at this presentation that maybe improves on what I did last time? So make sure you lead by example, but be very self-aware about what that looks like and get that input from other people. Definitely get an external network. I talked about it already. If you haven't, please do. It will do wonders for your confidence, and it will broaden your knowledge and your experience, and that can only be a good thing. And just understand that bigger picture. Don't pigeon yourself into HR. Understand the business, understand the market, and get yourself out there. I'm going to stop, Catherine.
There was even one more slide, but it's just a closing summary. So yeah, yes, it comes back to that personal brand. And I was really interested in what you said about the visibility. I think that can be really tricky for people in hybrid or remote organizations. And you have some visibility if you're in the office and you drop by someone's desk, but you might think it's a bit cringe to engage on a Viva Engage post. But if you don't do it, people don't know that you're there. So that's something I'm trying to work on at the moment. Anyway, thank you, Claire. There was so much information in that.
Sorry, I know. We have no time.
And we've got no time for questions, but actually we haven't had any questions, which means I think you've aced it. So we probably give Claire full marks. So if you have any feedback or advice, as we should frame it, for Claire, please pop it in the chat.
My email, I think, is public, so it's cwilliams@ciphr.com, and you can find me on social media and ping me notes. So I'm around, I'm visible, I am visible. So
she is very visible.
I am. So you feel free to get in touch. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
There's loads of positive notes in the chat. So great that so many of you have found helpful tips. At the end of this webinar, you'll get a chance to just leave us a rating and some feedback or advice in the form. That's always really helpful for us. You can also use that to opt in for more information about anything from Ciphr. And if you want to revisit that white paper, didn't get a chance to get a copy earlier, it's on our website. If you go to ciphr.com resources, there's a section for white papers, or the URL is on your screen here. All this has been recorded, so we'll get that over to you by email as soon as we can. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Claire, for sharing your wisdom today and experiences. It's been really valuable. Thanks, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.